So today let's dive into a topic that I get asked about in our clinic all the time. I get people that come in and they want hormone panels run. And ultimately the question we're going to answer today is, are your hormones the reason for your long-term health issues? So I'm Dr. Jeff Cumrow, and ultimately what we do in our clinic is we work to optimize the hardware and the software of the system. We work to optimize the brain and the body, but we also have to work to optimize the energetic systems that fuel them, because if we have one and we don't have the other, it doesn't do you any good. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into our topic here. So like I said, I get people all the time, at least once a week, people will come in and say, I think I need a hormone panel, or I'm looking to get a hormone panel, or I just had a hormone panel run, or something along those lines. And the ultimate question is it my hormones that are leading to my long-term health issues? And this is a difficult question to answer, because in some cases the answer can be yes. In some cases the answer can be no. And the only way to know is to actually get the blood work done, right? So it's not bad lab work to run. It's not something that I'm going to ever say that you shouldn't have done. What I'm going to say is we have to be cautious, and we have to look at it in perspective of everything else, right? So if that lab work comes back and your hormones are negative, why is that the case? Negative as far as like they're in the normal range. If it comes back and your hormones are out of range, why is that the case? And ultimately, a lot of problems are caused by hormones, but it's probably not the thing that you expect. So when we first get put under stress, our body does a series of different things. Ultimately, it's a game of survival, right? So it wants us to be able to either fight or run away. It wants us to be able to survive either way. With that, we increase the energetic systems throughout our body, right? Because if we don't have energy, then we're not able to fight very long, and we're probably going to lose. We end up increasing our clotting factors, because if we get cut, we don't want to bleed to death. We increase our immune system, because our immune system is going to protect us both with the inflammatory system to help heal wounds, and to, if something gets into one of those cuts, you don't want it to infect you and cause problems, right? We increase blood pressure to help fuel the body. We increase all of these systems that are going to ultimately help us fuel our body or fight. We increase our muscle tone, because we have to have the muscles to fight or run away. At the same time, we decrease the systems that are not required for survival. What systems are they? Healing and repairing. You don't need it right away, right? You need to have that inflammatory system to help get the immediate system going, the immediate repairs or whatever. But we turn down the inflammatory, or we turn down the healing and repairing system, because that's something we can do tomorrow if we survive today. We turn down the gut, because we don't need to digest a meal if we don't survive till tomorrow. We turn down the reproductive system, because again, reproduction is not the focus of the time. We have to survive to actually have that. When we turn down that reproductive system, this is where we can see a little bit of reflection on stress in that hormonal system. And in many cases, this is what the problem is, right? We are under stress so much in today's society, whether it's the 60-hour work weeks, or the excessive traffic, or the kids' activities that have us constantly running, or the stuff that's on social media and the constant homework that the kids are facing. All of us are facing more and more stress. And the question is out there, like, why are kids going through puberty earlier? Why are kids not going through puberty on time? Why are adults having all these hormonal issues? A lot of it comes back to the stress system. And that stress system, when we increase that cortisol, that's what happens to the body, is we decrease the amount that we focus on reproduction and gut, healing and repairing, different things like that. Now, what happens if you have all of those things for a long period of time? If you have that increased energy mobilization, you get diabetes, right? That's ultimately what diabetes is, increased blood sugar for a period of time. When you have high blood pressure for a period of time, cardiovascular disease, right? Increased clotting factors, strokes are a higher risk. If we have the increased immune system, we have autoimmunity. If we have the decrease in gut, we don't digest things as well. We're a little bit more prone to having issues with that, but we're also more susceptible to things like candida yeast infections and whatnot, because that acidity in the body is ultimately what's supposed to kill that off. If we have decreased healing and repairing, cancer is a possibility, right? That's ultimately what that is, a failure of the system. The immune system is not working as well as it should, and we don't have the healing and repairing that we should have. When we have the reproductive issues, it shows up as hormonal changes, right? So even if you have the system come back and it says your hormone panel is normal, it doesn't necessarily mean that hormones aren't your cause. Even if you have it come back and it says that your hormones are thrown off, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the cause. What is the underlying factor? And in most cases that I see, stress is that underlying factor. So the question remains, what can we do if we're faced with this type of scenario? So the first thing we have to go through, and this doesn't matter if we're talking about, cancer, or we're talking about heart disease, or we're talking about, it doesn't matter which health challenge you're talking about. And we're not talking about curing cancer on this. We're not talking about curing heart disease. We're just talking in generalities here. But when we're talking about any health issue, the first thing you have to do is recover. Right? And this is what a lot of people want to skip. They want to skip from the recovery and go into that building, that fortifying the system. They want to build the amount of energy that they have, because that's what they perceive as the problem, is they don't have enough energy. But when you're constantly pushing yourself and you're already pushing your system and you don't realize it, that's that constant stress that's on our system. We're running 70, 80 hours a week and it's just too much, right? So if we try and add exercise in there, if we try and get up an hour earlier, if we try and do some of these things, it's not the right approach at first. We have to go through that recovery stage. And that's going to be different for each person. It's going to be different in each scenario, because different stressors are going to cause different people different things. So some people are going to need nutrition to get out of it. Some people are going to need, some sort of medication or treatment. Some people are going to need, more stretching or different things like that. But whatever the case is, we have to go through that recovery phase. Once we have that recovery phase, and a great way to visualize this is if you look at a bank account, right? When we're in that recovery phase, we're in debt and we're working to dig our way out of debt. That's the best way to look at this. As we move into that fortification stage, the building up of the systems, this is where we really want to expand our income, so to speak. We want to increase our energetic system so we have more energy to do all of these different things that we need to do. So this is where, we would move into the stage where we would use things like exercise, or we would use things like, metabolic therapies, or different things that are going to expand our reach. Brain training, different things like that can be used to increase the capacity or increase that income. And when you have that increased income, you have more energy left over, right? Makes sense, right? If we're looking at the financial assessment of this, first of all, you're digging yourself out of debt. Then we've got to work on building up your emergency fund. We've got to build up, your retirement fund, all that other stuff. Now, the final stage of this is optimization. How do we keep this for the long term? How many people do you know that have gone through and, they've lost a bunch of weight, or they've gotten healthy in some way, shape, or form, and then 6 months or a year later, they're right back where they were before, maybe even a little bit worse situation. And it often occurs that they're a little bit worse than they were before. They gain a little bit more weight back, or they end up a little bit sicker because they went back to that same lifestyle. They didn't have the optimized thing that led to a lifestyle change, or a long-term lifetime change in that lifestyle that ultimately got the ball rolling in the right direction and kept it moving in that way. And that comes down to, community. Who are you surrounded with? It comes down to, what type of habits have you developed? How have you systemized things so it's going to save you time, so it's not so much work all the time? And when we have that whole picture, that is ultimately the symphonic method of healing. We have to have all of them. We have to have each little piece playing in unison. And when we do that, you enjoy health. But it ultimately depends on where you're at. Are you in that recovery stage? Are you in that fortification stage? Are you looking for that optimization to make that lifetime change? And that's ultimately what we need to look at in health. We don't necessarily need to look specifically at hormonal issues, because hormonal issues do give you great information. But what is the underlying cause of it? And this is what I see in my practice more than anything. It's the underlying issue is stress. And sometimes it's easy to find where the stress is coming from. Sometimes it's very difficult to find where the stress is coming from. And that stress is different for each person. What stresses me out is not the same as what stresses you out, right? So it's different for you. And just because somebody else found what stresses them out and they made that change doesn't mean it's going to be the same for you. It might be food intolerances for one person. It might be, a toxicity of some variety on somebody else. It might be a nutritional deficiency for somebody else. There's a bunch of different things that can lead us in these directions. But when we start stacking together the right things to give you the outcome that you need, That's ultimately what you want. So hormonal panels, like I said, very, very good, but take them in perspective. It's not just the sex hormones that need to be tested. It's not just testosterone and estrogen and progesterone and things like that. We also need to look at what your cortisol levels are, because those cortisol levels can change the sex hormones. When we get under stress, we decrease that reproductive system so we can survive for the long term. And that's ultimately the perspective that I wanted to give you here is we've got to take everything into consideration when we do this and make sure that we're actually looking at the whole picture. We've gotten into a trap in healthcare where we try and break everything down to smaller and smaller pieces. And when we do that, sometimes that's great, right? If you're having surgery on something, you want to know exactly the place that needs to have surgery. But when we're looking at general health, when we're looking at long-term chronic diseases, we have to look at the whole picture, because there's so much that goes into this. Those complex issues require complex solutions. We can't just throw one simple thing. And that's why you see so many people that go through and they're like, well, I went through this gut health protocol and it helped me, but I'm not better. It's part of the problem. It's not the whole problem. We've got to have a truly holistic solution. And when you're looking at hormones, it's even more important to look at that holistic picture to get the best idea of what's going to work for you. So if you find this helpful, please like or subscribe. It gives me good information on what I can share with you. Obviously, if I know what I can share with you, then I can share more of that stuff, and it's likely to be more helpful for you. So like or subscribe. As always, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. I know those are your most valuable resources, and I can't wait to see you next week.